You do not need anyone to tell you that you are tired. You already know. You have known for a while. It is the kind of knowing that does not arrive suddenly. It builds, slowly, layer by layer. One more responsibility that you did not ask for. One more night when sleep came but rest did not. One more morning when you opened your eyes and the first thing you felt was not gratitude or hope, but the flat, heavy weight of everything that was waiting for you on the other side of getting up. And yet you got up. You have been getting up, day after day, week after week, carrying something that no one around you fully understands because you have become very good at making it look like you are fine. But you are not fine. Somewhere underneath the routines, underneath the smiles, underneath the answers you give when people ask how you are doing, there is an honest sentence that you have probably never said out loud, but that your soul has been whispering for longer than you want to admit. God, I feel tired. Not the kind of tired that a weekend can fix. Not the kind that disappears after a long sleep or a holiday. This is a deeper thing. It lives in the place where your energy used to be, where your motivation used to be, where your faith used to feel alive and close and real. And now that place feels hollow, like a room that someone moved out of without telling you. The furniture is gone, the lights are off, and you are standing in the middle of it, wondering when exactly everything became this empty. If that is where you are tonight, or this morning, or whatever hour finds you listening to these words, then what follows is not a quick fix. It is not a motivational speech designed to pump you full of energy you do not have. It is not a list of things you should be doing better. It is something much simpler, and, if you let it in, something much deeper. It is a long, slow walk through the life and words of a man who understood tiredness from the inside. Not tiredness observed from a distance, but tiredness lived, felt in his own body, carried in his own bones. And from the middle of that tiredness, he spoke words that have been finding exhausted people for 2,000 years and saying the same thing to every one of them. You do not have to carry this alone. His name is Jesus of Nazareth, and one of the most overlooked details in the entire gospel record is that he got tired. The Son of God, the one who spoke the world into existence, the one who held the stars in place and called the oceans into being, walked through this earth in a human body that needed food, needed water, needed sleep, and sometimes simply ran out of strength. That is not a weakness in the story. It is the center of it. Because if Jesus never got tired, his invitation to the weary would be the words of someone who did not understand. But he did get tired, and because he did, his words carry a weight that no comfortable, well-rested teacher could ever match. There is a scene in the Gospel of John, chapter 4, that is usually remembered for the conversation Jesus had with a Samaritan woman at a well. And that conversation is extraordinary. But there is a detail at the beginning of the story that most people read past without noticing. The text says that Jesus, wearied from his journey, sat down by the well. The word the gospel writer uses does not mean mildly fatigued. It means spent, depleted, drained from the road. He had been walking under the sun through difficult terrain, and when he reached that well near the town of Sychar, he did not kneel and pray. He did not deliver a sermon to the passing crowd. He sat down because he was tired. Hold that image for a moment. The Son of God, sitting on the edge of a stone well in the heat of the day, too weary to keep walking. Not pretending to be strong, not pushing through with divine willpower, sitting, resting, acknowledging that his body needed something he could not override with spiritual authority. And it was in that state, in that moment of honest human exhaustion, that one of the most transformative conversations in all of Scripture took place. A woman came to the well. She came alone in the heat of midday, which was unusual. Women in that culture drew water together in the cool of the morning. Coming alone at noon meant she was avoiding the others. It meant she had a past that made her unwelcome in the group. It meant she was carrying her own kind of tiredness, the tiredness of being judged, excluded, defined by mistakes that she could not undo, and quietly resigned to a life lived on the margins. And Jesus, from his place of exhaustion, spoke to her. He asked her for a drink of water, a simple human request from a tired man to a passing stranger. But in that culture, it was anything but simple. A Jewish man was not supposed to speak to a Samaritan woman. The ethnic hostility between their peoples had been calcified for centuries. The social rules said they should have ignored each other. But Jesus, tired as he was, did not follow the social rules. He opened a conversation, and that conversation became one of the most intimate revelations of his identity recorded anywhere in the Gospels. He told her about living water. He told her that anyone who drinks the water he gives would never thirst again. She was intrigued, skeptical, guarded. Then he told her things about her life that no stranger should have known. She had had 5 husbands, and the man she was with now was not her husband. He did not say this to shame her. There was no venom in his words. He simply told her the truth, and in doing so, he showed her that she was fully known, not partially, not on the surface, fully, and she was not rejected. She asked him about worship, about where and how to worship God properly. And Jesus said something that shattered every geographical and institutional boundary that had ever been placed on the presence of God. He said that a time was coming, and had already come, when true worshippers would worship the Father in spirit and in truth. Not in this mountain or that temple, in spirit, in truth. Wherever you are, whoever you are, however broken or exhausted or disqualified you feel. And then, in the most direct statement of his identity in the entire Gospel of John, Jesus told her plainly, "I, the one speaking to you, I am he." The Messiah, the one she had been waiting for without knowing it, the one the whole world had been waiting for. And he chose to reveal himself not to a priest, not to a scholar, not to a religious leader with impeccable credentials, but to a tired, lonely, shame-carrying woman at a well in the middle of the day. That matters. It matters for every person listening right now who feels like God reveals himself to other people, but not to them. It matters for every person who assumes that spiritual experiences are reserved for the spiritually impressive, the disciplined, the devoted, the ones who have their lives in order. Jesus chose a woman who had nothing in order, and he met her at a well when he himself was exhausted. The encounter between 2 tired people became the moment when eternity broke into an ordinary afternoon. If you feel tired, you are not disqualified from encountering Jesus. You may be closer to him than you have been in a long time, because the gospel shows us again and again that Jesus does his most profound work not in the polished moments, but in the depleted ones, not when people are performing their best, but when they have run out of performance altogether. The well was not a temple, noon was not the sacred hour, and The woman was not a saint, but Jesus was there, and that was enough. Maybe the place you are in right now, the empty, exhausted, hollowed-out place, is not the spiritual desert you think it is. Maybe it is the well. Maybe it is exactly the place where Jesus sits down and starts a conversation you did not expect. Not because you earned it, not because you are in the right spiritual posture, but because he is drawn to the tired. He always has been, and he does not need you to be strong before he will speak. He only needs you to be honest, and tonight, the most honest thing you can say is the truest prayer you have. God, I feel tired, and he hears it, and he does not turn away. There is a pattern in the life of Jesus that is easy to miss if you only focus on the miracles and the sermons. Woven through the gospel accounts is a thread of withdrawal. Jesus kept pulling away from the crowds, not because he did not care about them, but because he understood something about the human experience of tiredness that most people refuse to learn. Rest is not laziness. It is not failure. It is not a sign that you do not care enough. Rest is the soil in which the deepest things grow. And even Jesus needed it. The Gospel of Mark, chapter 1, describes a day in the life of Jesus that would have exhausted anyone. He teaches in the synagogue. He casts out an unclean spirit. He goes to Simon Peter's house and heals Peter's mother-in-law. Then, that evening, the whole town gathers at the door, bringing everyone who is sick or possessed, and Jesus heals many of them. It is a marathon of ministry. A day of non-stop giving, pouring out energy and compassion and power until there is nothing left. And then the text says, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. He did not sleep in. He did not stay at Peter's house and enjoy the admiration of the crowd. He withdrew into silence, into solitude, into the presence of his Father. Before the world woke up and started asking things of him again, he went to the one place where he could be refilled. When the disciples found him, they were almost frustrated. Everyone is looking for you, they said, as if his absence was a problem, as if being alone with God was somehow less important than being available to the crowd. But Jesus did not apologize. He did not rush back. He simply told them it was time to move on to the next towns, because that was why he had come. This scene reveals something crucial about the way Jesus handled the pressure of being constantly needed. He did not try to meet every demand by running himself into the ground. He recognized that the ability to give was directly connected to the practice of receiving. And the receiving happened in quiet, in solitude, in the still, dark hours when no one was watching. Jesus prayed not because he was performing spirituality. He prayed because he needed to. His human soul needed the communion with his Father the way his human body needed bread and water. If you are someone who gives constantly, if you are the person everyone leans on, if you are the one who holds things together for your family, your friends, your workplace, your church, and you are quietly running out of fuel, the withdrawal of Jesus is not a rebuke. It is permission. Permission to step away. Permission to close the door. Permission to say, I need to be alone with God right now because I am empty and I cannot pour from an empty vessel. That is not selfishness. That is the pattern Jesus himself modeled. And if the Son of God needed solitude and rest, it should be very difficult for any of us to pretend that we do not. The pressure to be constantly available, constantly productive, constantly strong is not from God. It is from a world that has confused busyness with faithfulness and exhaustion with devotion. But Jesus never taught that. He never said, "Blessed are the overworked." He never said, "Grind until you break and then grind some more." He said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." He said, "My yoke is easy and my burden is light." He withdrew to pray. He slept in boats. He sat at wells. He took meals with friends. He lived at a pace that allowed his soul to breathe. And the world has never been more transformed by any single life. There is a kind of tiredness that comes from doing too much. But there is another kind that comes from something deeper. It is the tiredness of a soul that has been running on fumes spiritually. The prayers that used to come easily now feel forced. The scriptures that used to feel alive now feel like words on a page. The faith that used to sustain you in the dark now flickers like a candle in a drafty room. You have not stopped believing, exactly, but the warmth is gone, the closeness is gone, and what is left is a kind of spiritual muscle memory, going through the motions because you do not know what else to do, but feeling nothing while you do it. If that is you, then hear this carefully. Spiritual dryness is not the same as spiritual failure. There are seasons in the life of faith that feel like a desert, and the Bible does not shy away from naming them. The Psalms are full of prayers that sound exactly like what you are feeling. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? That is Psalm 13, and it was written by David, the man the Bible calls a man after God's own heart. If David could feel forgotten by God, then your own sense of distance is not proof that something is wrong with you. It is proof that you are human, and that your faith is honest enough to admit what it is experiencing, rather than papering over it with cheerful language that does not match what is actually happening inside. The prophet Isaiah, writing to a people who had been through devastation, said something that speaks directly to the person who is spiritually exhausted. In chapter 40, verses 28 through 31, he wrote, "Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary, and his understanding no one can fathom. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint." That passage does not say that tiredness is a sin. It says that even the young and the strong get tired. Even the most energetic, most capable, most naturally resilient people eventually stumble. Tiredness is not a moral failure. It is a human reality, and the promise is not that you will never get tired. The promise is that when you do, when your strength is gone and your legs are shaking and you cannot take another step, God does not abandon you to your exhaustion. He renews you. He gives strength to the weary, not to the strong, to the weary. The strength he offers is not a reward for people who manage to avoid getting tired. It is a gift for people who are already there, already spent, already running on nothing. And the progression in that passage is worth noticing. It does not go from weakness straight to soaring. It says they will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. Soaring, running, walking. The order moves from the most dramatic to the most ordinary, And maybe that is because the hardest part of faith is not the soaring moments. Those are exhilarating. The hardest part is the walking, the daily, undramatic, one foot in front of the other faithfulness that no one applauds and no one notices. The promise that you will walk and not be faint may be the most important line in the entire passage, because that is where most of life is lived. Not in the air, not at full speed, but in the slow, steady, unspectacular walk of showing up again today, even though you are tired. God does not demand that you soar when you can barely stand. He meets you where you are. If all you can do today is walk, then walk. And the promise of Isaiah is that even the walking will be sustained. You will not faint. You will not collapse. Not because you are strong, but because the everlasting God, the Creator of the ends of the earth, is underneath you. And He does not grow tired. And this understanding of tiredness as a place where God meets you, not a place where God leaves you, shows up in one of the most misunderstood stories in the Gospels. In the Gospel of Luke, chapter 10, Jesus visits the home of two sisters, Martha and Mary. Martha is busy with preparations. She is doing what any good host would do. She is cooking, cleaning, arranging, making sure everything is right. She is working hard, and there is nothing wrong with that. The problem is not that Martha is serving. The problem is that Martha is drowning in her serving and she cannot stop. Meanwhile, Mary is sitting at the feet of Jesus, listening to what he is saying. She has set everything else aside. The dishes can wait. The floor can wait. The meal can wait. The one thing that matters to her in this moment is being near Jesus and hearing his voice. Martha reaches her breaking point. She comes to Jesus and says, with the raw frustration of someone who has been holding everything together while someone else does nothing, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." The exhaustion in that question is palpable. Don't you care? That is not just a complaint about chores. That is the cry of a tired person who feels unseen, who feels like the weight of the world is on her shoulders and no one notices, who has been running on obligation and duty and responsibility until her soul is wrung dry, and the only emotion left is resentment. Don't you care? Have you ever prayed that? Have you ever looked at God in the middle of your exhaustion and said, "I am doing everything I'm supposed to be doing, and it feels like you do not even notice"? Jesus' response is one of the most tender and frequently misapplied passages in the New Testament. He says, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her." He says her name twice, Martha, Martha. In the Bible, when God repeats a name, it is an act of intimacy, not irritation. Abraham, Abraham, Moses, Moses, Samuel, Samuel. It is the way a parent speaks to a child who is spiraling, not with anger, with tenderness, with the kind of calm that says, "I see you. I see what you're doing. I see how hard you're working, and I need you to stop, not because your work does not matter, but because you matter more than your work, and right now you are losing yourself in the doing." Jesus was not scolding Martha for being responsible. He was rescuing her from a particular kind of tiredness, the tiredness that comes from believing that your value is in what you produce, the exhaustion of a life built on performance, the bone-deep weariness of someone who cannot sit still because sitting still feels like failure. Martha was tired not because she was lazy. She was tired because she could not stop. And Jesus, with love, told her that the one thing she really needed was not another task accomplished. It was presence, His presence. The unhurried, unearned, simply being near Him kind of rest that Mary had chosen. For the person listening right now who cannot stop doing, who feels guilty every time they rest, who measures their worth by how much they accomplish and how little they complain, Jesus is not angry with you. He is not disappointed in your dedication. He is speaking your name twice, gently, with the kind of love that sees the exhaustion underneath the efficiency. And He is saying, few things are needed, indeed, only one. And that one thing is not another task on your list. It is me. Sit down. Let the dishes wait. Let the obligations wait. Let the world spin for a few minutes without your hands holding it up. And just be here. That is not laziness. That is the bravest kind of obedience. Because for some people, the hardest command Jesus ever gave is not love your enemies or sell everything you have. The hardest command is rest, and He gives it because He knows what happens to a soul that never stops. It does not get stronger, it gets brittle. It does not get more faithful, it gets more resentful. And it does not get closer to God. It gets further away, so consumed with doing things for God that it forgets how to simply be with God. And if Martha represents the tiredness of the overworker, there is another woman in the Gospels who represents the tiredness of the one who has been suffering for so long that they have almost given up hope. Her story is found in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 5, and it is one of the most physically and emotionally exhausting stories in Scripture. She is not named. The text simply describes her as a woman who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. 12 years. In the ancient world, this kind of condition was not just a medical problem. It was a social and religious catastrophe. Under the purity laws, a woman with a discharge of blood was considered ceremonially unclean. Anything she sat on was unclean. Anyone who touched her was unclean. For 12 years, this woman had been cut off from normal human contact, from the temple, from worship, from community. She had spent everything she had on doctors, and instead of getting better, she had gotten worse. Try to inhabit that kind of tiredness for a moment. 12 years of a body that will not cooperate. 12 years of hoping that the next doctor, the next treatment, the next remedy would be the one that finally worked. 12 years of watching her savings disappear, her social world shrink, her dignity erode. 12 years of waking up every morning and being reminded that nothing has changed. That is not ordinary fatigue. That is the tiredness of sustained suffering, the kind that grinds a person down so slowly that they almost do not notice themselves disappearing. And then she hears that Jesus is passing through, and something inside her, some last flickering ember of faith that 12 years of disappointment had not quite managed to extinguish, tells her to go to Him, not to stand in front of Him, not to make a public plea. She is too tired for that, too beaten down, too conditioned to be invisible. She tells herself, if I just touch His clothes, I will be healed. That is the faith of an exhausted woman. Not bold, not loud, not theologically articulate, just desperate enough to reach out one more time after 12 years of reaching out and coming up empty. She pushes through the crowd. The text says there was a large crowd pressing around Jesus. She is unclean, which means every person she bumps against becomes ceremonially unclean because of her. She does not care. She cannot care any more. The rules that kept her isolated for 12 years are not going to keep her from this one chance. She reaches out and touches the edge of his garment, and immediately, the text says, her bleeding stops. She feels in her body that she is freed from her suffering, but something else happens at the same time. Jesus stops. In the middle of a surging crowd, on his way to heal the dying daughter of a synagogue ruler, Jesus stops and says, "Who touched my clothes?" The disciples think the question is absurd. "You see the people crowding against you," they say, "and yet you can ask, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus keeps looking around. He felt power go out from him. He knew that someone had reached for him with a different kind of touch. Not the pressing of the crowd, the reaching of a desperate soul. The woman, realizing she cannot hide, falls at his feet trembling. She tells him the whole truth, all 12 years of it, the suffering, the doctors, the money, the isolation, the desperation. She tells him everything. And Jesus does not scold her for touching him while she was unclean. He does not rebuke her for interrupting his journey. He says, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." Daughter, that is the only time in all 4 Gospels that Jesus calls anyone daughter, not woman, not you there. Daughter, a term of belonging, a term of family, a term that tells a woman who has been outside the family of the community for 12 years that she is inside the family of God. And he tells her to go in peace, not just to go in health, in peace. The shalom of God, the wholeness that includes body and soul and spirit and relationship, all of it restored in a single sentence. If you are the person who has been tired for so long that you have almost stopped hoping, if you have been suffering from something that has not gotten better despite everything you have tried, if you have reached out again and again and come back empty-handed again and again, this story is not just ancient history. It is a picture of what Jesus does when the last, smallest, most exhausted flicker of faith reaches toward him. He stops. In the middle of everything else he is doing, he stops. He turns. He sees you. And he does not say, "Your faith should have been bigger." He says, "Your faith has healed you. Go in peace." He does not need your faith to be impressive. He needs it to be real. And the realest faith is often the most tired faith, the faith that has been through 12 years of nothing working, the faith that does not have the energy for a bold declaration, the faith that can only manage if I just touch the edge of his clothes. That is enough. For Jesus, that is more than enough, because he is not measuring the size of your reach. He is responding to the direction of it. And if your tired, trembling hand is reaching toward him, even barely, even weakly, even in the last shred of hope you have left, he will meet you there. And this brings us to a story that is not from the Gospels, but speaks so directly to the experience of spiritual exhaustion that it deserves to be heard here. In the first book of Kings, chapter 19, the prophet Elijah has just experienced one of the greatest spiritual victories in the Old Testament. He stood alone on Mount Carmel against 450 prophets of Baal, called down fire from heaven, and proved that the Lord was the true God. It was a moment of extraordinary faith, power, and courage. By any measure, Elijah should have been at the peak of his spiritual life. But then Queen Jezebel sends him a message threatening to kill him. And Elijah, the same man who just faced down an army of false prophets without flinching, runs. He runs into the wilderness, sits down under a broom tree, and prays the prayer of a man who is completely spent. I have had enough, Lord. Take my life. This is the tiredness that comes after the victory, the crash that follows the high, the emptiness that floods in when the adrenaline runs out, and you realize that you are still the same fragile human being you were before the mountain. Elijah was not being faithless. He was being human. And the thing that makes this story so remarkable is how God responded. God did not rebuke him. He did not say, "How dare you be tired after what I just did through you?" He did not lecture him about gratitude. He did not tell him to pull himself together and get back on the mountain. God sent an angel, and the angel did two things. He gave Elijah food, and he told him to sleep. Then Elijah ate, drank, and lay back down. And the angel came a second time and said, "Get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you." And Elijah ate again, and then traveled 40 days and 40 nights to the mountain of God. Read that again slowly. The journey is too much for you. God did not deny the difficulty. He did not say, "The journey is not that hard. You just need a better attitude." He said it plainly. The journey is too much for you. And then he provided what Elijah needed: food, rest, and the strength to keep going. Not the strength to keep going forever without stopping, the strength to keep going for the next stretch. For the person listening who has just come through something difficult, who should be feeling victorious but instead feels hollow, who fought the good fight and won but now cannot seem to find the energy to get off the floor, Elijah is your permission slip. You are not weak for being tired after a battle. You are not faithless for crashing after a victory. You are human. And God's response to your exhaustion is not disappointment. It is bread and water and the gentle command to rest. Because the journey is too much for you to take on your own. And He knows that. He has always known that. And this same compassion for the tired body and the tired soul shows up in one of the most painful scenes in all 4 Gospels. The night before Jesus was crucified, He took His closest disciples, Peter, James, and John, into the Garden of Gethsemane to pray. He was in anguish. He knew what was coming. He knew He was about to be arrested, tortured, and killed, and He asked His friends to stay with Him. "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death," He said. "Stay here and keep watch with me." He went a little further, fell to the ground, and prayed the most wrenching prayer in Scripture. "Abba, Father, everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what you will." And when He came back to the 3 disciples, He found them sleeping. They were exhausted. The day had been long, the emotional weight was enormous, and their bodies had simply given out. "Simon," Jesus said to Peter, "are you asleep? Couldn't you keep watch for 1 hour?" And then He said something that resonates with every tired soul who has ever wanted to do the right thing but could not find the strength. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. That is not a condemnation. It is a diagnosis. It is Jesus naming the reality that every human being lives with. You want to pray, but your body is spent. You want to show up, but your energy is gone. You want to be faithful, but your hands are shaking and your eyes will not stay open. Your spirit, the deep part of you that loves God and wants to follow Him, is willing. But your flesh, the mortal, fragile, limited body and mind and emotions that you live in, is weak. And Jesus knows that. He knew it that night in the garden. He knows it now. He did not expel the disciples for falling asleep. He did not replace them with more reliable friends. He came back to them 3 times, and 3 times they were sleeping. And he kept coming back. He kept checking on them. He kept waking them up gently, because he understood that their failure was not a failure of love. It was a failure of capacity. They did not have the physical or emotional resources to stay awake through the darkest night of his life, and he did not hold it against them. If you have been beating yourself up for not being strong enough, faithful enough, disciplined enough, awake enough in your spiritual life, the Garden of Gethsemane is where Jesus looks at your weakness and says, I know, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. I am not angry with you. I understand the limitation, and I am not leaving you because of it. And this tenderness toward human weakness is not limited to the garden. It shows up throughout the Gospels in the way Jesus handled the moments when people's faith buckled under the weight of what they were going through. Consider Peter walking on the water. The story is found in the Gospel of Matthew chapter 14. The disciples are in a boat on the Sea of Galilee, and Jesus is not with them. He has gone up on a mountainside to pray alone. A storm rises. The wind is against them. The waves are tossing the boat, and then, in the early hours of the morning, they see a figure walking on the water toward them. They are terrified. They think it is a ghost. Jesus calls out, Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid. And Peter, impulsive and brave and always willing to leap before he looks, says, Lord, if it's you, tell me to come to you on the water. Jesus says one word, Come, and Peter gets out of the boat. He steps onto the surface of the water and begins walking toward Jesus. For a few stunning seconds, he is doing the impossible. His faith is holding him up. His eyes are fixed on Jesus, and his feet are on the waves, and the storm is still raging, but it does not matter because Jesus is right there. And then Peter looks around. He sees the wind. He feels the spray. He takes his eyes off Jesus and puts them on the storm, and he begins to sink. And his prayer in that moment is not eloquent. It is not theological. It is 3 words. Lord, save me. That is all. The shortest, most desperate, most honest prayer in the New Testament. Lord, save me. I'm going under. I cannot do this. Help. And immediately, the text says, Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. Immediately. Not after a lecture, not after a delay designed to teach Peter a lesson. Immediately. And then Jesus says, You of little faith, why did you doubt? There is a common reading of that line that makes it sound like a rebuke. But look at what Jesus is actually doing while he says it. He is holding Peter. He has already caught him. He has already saved him. The question is not asked from a distance. It is asked from the embrace. It is Jesus holding a soaking wet, terrified man and asking, with more sadness than anger, Why did you take your eyes off me? If your faith has been sinking lately, if you stepped out in courage at some point, and now the storm has gotten your attention and the water is rising and you feel like you are going down, the response of Jesus is not to let you drown while he critiques your technique. His response is to reach out his hand immediately and catch you and hold you and ask you gently from the safety of his grip, Why did you doubt? Not to make you feel guilty, but to remind you that the one who told you to come is the same one who will not let you fall. You do not need great faith to be saved. You need real faith. And real faith sometimes looks like a man sinking in the waves with nothing left but a 3-word prayer. Lord, save me. If that is all you have right now, it is enough. It has always been enough. Because salvation was never about the strength of your grip. It was about the strength of His. And then there is the tiredness that comes from having nothing left to give. The tiredness of the depleted, the empty-handed, the ones who look at what they have and know it is not enough for what is ahead. There is a story in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 12, that speaks to this with stunning precision. Jesus is sitting across from the temple treasury, watching people put their offerings into the collection. Many wealthy people are throwing in large amounts. And then a poor widow comes and drops in 2 small copper coins, worth almost nothing, the smallest denomination of currency in circulation. 2 coins that would not buy a loaf of bread. Jesus calls His disciples over and says, "Truly, I tell you, this poor widow has put more into the treasury than all the others. They all gave out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in everything, all she had to live on." There are layers in this story that reach into the experience of anyone who feels like they have nothing left. The wealthy gave from their surplus. They had more than enough, and they offered a portion. It cost them nothing really. The widow gave from her insufficiency. She had almost nothing, and she gave all of it. It cost her everything. And Jesus did not say, "That poor woman should have kept something for herself." He did not say, "Someone should help her." He held her up as the example, not because poverty is noble in itself, but because the sincerity of her offering revealed something about the nature of true giving. It is not measured by the size of the gift. It is measured by the cost. And the most costly giving is the giving that comes from the place of having nothing left. If you are in that place right now, if you feel like you're running on empty and what little you have to offer feels laughable compared to what everyone else seems to bring, Jesus sees it differently. He sees the 2 coins. He sees the everything behind them. And He does not compare you to the wealthy people who give effortlessly. He honors the gift that comes from the bottom of the barrel. Because that gift, small as it looks, carries the weight of a heart that gave everything it had. Your tired, broken, barely hanging on faithfulness is not invisible to Jesus. It is the thing He points to and says, "That, right there, that is what real devotion looks like. Not the grand gesture from the comfortable position, the humble offering from the empty hand." You may feel like what you have left is too small to matter. But in the economy of God, the smallest offering given from the deepest exhaustion is worth more than a fortune given from comfort. Because God does not count the coins, He weighs the heart. And this is why the Beatitudes, the opening words of the Sermon on the Mount, are not the triumphant declaration that many people think they are. They are the words of Jesus spoken to a crowd of tired, poor, grieving, overlooked people. And the first thing He says to them is not "try harder." The first thing He says is "blessed." "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." The poor in spirit, not the spiritually accomplished, not the ones who have mastered prayer and fasting and devotion, the ones who are spiritually bankrupt, the ones who stand before God and say, "I have nothing, I am empty, I do not even have the energy to fake it." Jesus says the kingdom belongs to them. not will belong to them if they get it together, belongs to them now, in their emptiness. In their spiritual poverty, the kingdom is theirs. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Not blessed are those who have moved past their grief and gotten on with life. Blessed are those who are still mourning, still aching, still carrying the weight of a loss that has not healed. Jesus says comfort is coming, not a demand to stop crying, a promise that the tears will be met. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. The meek, the ones who do not have the energy to fight for their place, the ones who are too tired to compete, to push to the front, to assert themselves over others. Jesus says the whole earth is theirs, not the aggressive, not the powerful, the meek, the exhausted, the ones who have stopped trying to force their way into significance and have simply surrendered to whatever God decides to do. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Not the ones who have found righteousness, the ones who are still starving for it, the ones who wake up every morning wanting to live rightly and falling short every night, the ones whose spiritual appetite is genuine, but whose spiritual table feels bare. Jesus says they will be filled. The hunger itself is honored. The ache itself is blessed. The Beatitudes are not a pep talk for winners. They are a love letter to the losers, the mourners, the meek, the hungry. They are Jesus looking at a hillside full of tired people and saying, "You, the ones the world has overlooked, the ones who feel like they have nothing and are nothing, you are blessed, not because you performed well, because the kingdom of God was built for people exactly like you. If you are tired, you are not outside the Beatitudes, you are at the center of them. Every promise Jesus made on that hillside was aimed at people who had reached the end of their own resources. And the word blessed does not mean happy in the modern shallow sense. It means favored by God, held by God, noticed by God when no one else is noticing. That is the tiredness that the Beatitudes dignify, not the tiredness of laziness, the tiredness of a life lived honestly in a world that takes more than it gives. Jesus sees that tiredness, and he calls it blessed. And this is where something needs to be said about what rest actually is in the context of the gospel, because rest, as Jesus teaches it, is not just the absence of activity. It is not lying on the couch doing nothing. Rest, in the biblical sense, is trust. It is the deep internal release that happens when you stop trying to hold everything together and let God hold it instead. It is what happens when you stop believing that the world will fall apart if you stop controlling it. It is the spiritual equivalent of opening your clenched fists and letting someone stronger take the weight. The writer of Hebrews chapter 4 says, "There remains then a Sabbath rest for the people of God. For anyone who enters God's rest also rests from their works, just as God did from his." That rest is not a destination you arrive at when life gets easier. It is a posture you enter now, in the middle of the difficulty, by choosing to trust that God is in control even when you are not. This is why rest can feel like the hardest thing in the world, not because it requires effort, but because it requires surrender. And surrender, for most of us, is terrifying. Surrender means admitting that you are not strong enough. Surrender means letting go of the illusion that your effort is what keeps everything from falling apart. Surrender means trusting someone you cannot see with things you care about more than anything. And surrender, for the tired soul, means lying down in the middle of the storm and letting the one who calms storms do what only he can do. In the Gospel of Mark chapter 4, while a violent squall is tossing the boat and the disciples are panicking, Jesus is asleep, on a cushion, in the back of the boat, asleep. That is not indifference. That is rest. That is the embodiment of what it looks like to trust the Father so completely that even the roaring of the wind and the crashing of the waves cannot disturb your peace. Jesus slept in the storm because he knew who was in control, and he was able to calm the storm precisely because he was not afraid of it. The disciples were terrified and exhausted because they were trying to save themselves. Jesus was at rest because he was not. And when they woke him up in a panic, he stood up, spoke a word, and the wind and the waves obeyed. Then he asked them, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" He was not asking them to be braver. He was asking them to rest in him, in the knowledge that the one who is with them is greater than the one who is against them. If your life feels like a storm right now, and your exhaustion comes from the endless effort of trying to keep the boat from sinking, Jesus offers something that sounds almost absurd. He offers you sleep in the storm, not because the storm is not real, but because the one who commands the storm is in the boat with you, and his peace is not dependent on calm waters. His peace is the thing that creates calm waters, and he wants to share it with you, not after the storm passes, now, in the middle of it, with the waves still crashing. Rest is not something you do when life gets easier. Rest is something you receive from Jesus in the middle of the mess, and the reception of that rest is an act of faith, more powerful than any effort you could muster on your own. Because it says, "I trust you, God. I cannot fix this. I cannot control this. I cannot survive this on my own strength. But I believe that you are here. And because you are here, I can close my eyes." That is not passivity. That is radical trust. And it is the birthright of every exhausted child of God. And there is another kind of tiredness that the Gospels speak to with startling honesty. It is the tiredness that comes from running, not running in a healthy sense, running from something, running from God, running from yourself, running from the life you know you're supposed to be living, and ending up in a place so far from home that you cannot even remember what home felt like. That kind of running is exhausting in a way that nothing else is, because every step takes you further from the one thing that could actually give you rest. The parable of the prodigal son, found in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 15, is usually told as a story about forgiveness. And it is. But it is also, if you read it from the inside out, a story about exhaustion. Not the exhaustion of hard work, the exhaustion of a life spent chasing the wrong things. A young man demands his inheritance from his father while his father is still alive. It is an act of deep disrespect, essentially saying, "I wish you were dead so I could have what's coming to me." The father, in an act of heartbreaking grace, gives it to him. The son takes everything and leaves for a distant country, and there, the text says, he squanders his wealth in wild living. Every coin, every asset, every gift his father gave him burned through in pursuit of pleasure, freedom, and the intoxicating illusion that life without boundaries is the same as life without limits. And then the money runs out, and a famine hits. And suddenly the son who had everything has nothing. He hires himself out to a local farmer, and the farmer sends him to feed pigs. For a Jewish audience, this is the ultimate degradation, Pigs were unclean animals. To be feeding pigs is to be at the absolute lowest rung of a society that already considers you an outsider. And the text adds a devastating detail. He longed to eat the food the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. That is the tiredness of the runaway, not the tiredness of someone who is working hard at the right things. The tiredness of someone who is working hard at the wrong things. The tiredness of a soul that has been chasing substitutes for love and has come up empty every single time. The tiredness that sits at the bottom of every addiction, every unhealthy relationship, every season of living in a way that you know, in the deepest part of yourself, is not who you were made to be. You do not have to be in a literal pig pen to know what the prodigal felt. You just have to have reached the point where the things you were running toward have stopped delivering what they promised, and you are left with the hollow, aching realization that you traded everything real for everything temporary. And then comes the line that changes everything. The text says, "He came to his senses." Some translations say, "He came to himself." He woke up. He looked around at the pigs and the filth and the emptiness, and he remembered his father's house. He remembered that even the hired servants in his father's home had food to spare, and he decided to go home, not with confidence, not with pride, with a prepared speech of humiliation. "Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants." He started the long walk back, and while he was still a long way off, his father saw him. The father had been watching, day after day scanning the horizon, hoping that this might be the day his son came home. And when he saw the figure in the distance, he did not wait. He did not stand at the door with folded arms. He ran. An older man in the ancient Middle East running was considered undignified, almost shameful. But the father did not care about his dignity. His son was coming home. He threw his arms around the son who reeked of pig filth and failure. He kissed him. The son tried to begin his speech, but the father cut him off. He called for the best robe, a ring for his finger, sandals for his feet, and a feast. This son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. The robe meant restoration to honor. The ring meant authority and belonging. The sandals meant he was a son, not a servant, because servants went barefoot. And the feast meant celebration. The father was not tolerating his son's return. He was throwing a party, because the son who had exhausted himself chasing the wrong life had finally come home, and home was waiting for him. Home had always been waiting. If your tiredness comes from running, if the exhaustion you feel is the result of a life spent chasing things that cannot satisfy, if you have burned through your resources and your relationships and your peace, pursuing something that looked like freedom but turned out to be a cage, the prodigal story is your invitation. You can come home. The road is open. The Father is watching. And he will not meet you with a lecture or a list of conditions. He will run. You do not have to clean up first. You do not have to prove that you have changed. You do not have to earn your way back into the family. You just have to turn around, one step, in the direction of home, and the Father will cover the rest of the distance. That is grace. That is the heart of God toward the exhausted, burned out, pig-stained runaway who has nowhere else to go. Come home. The party is for you. And this same relentless pursuit of the exhausted and the lost shows up in another parable that Jesus told in the same chapter, the parable of the lost sheep. The Pharisees and the teachers of the law were criticizing Jesus for welcoming sinners and eating with them. People who were morally exhausted, spiritually outcast, socially rejected. And Jesus answered them with a story. Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Doesn't he leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home. There are two details in this story that matter enormously for the tired person. The first is the word until. The shepherd does not search for a few hours and then give up. He does not set a limit on how long the search will take. He goes after the lost sheep until he finds it. That is the persistence of God toward the one who has wandered, not a casual effort that expires when it becomes inconvenient. An until, a never stopping, never quitting, I will find you wherever you are kind of love. The second detail is what happens when the shepherd finds the sheep. He puts it on his shoulders. He does not drive it back with a stick. He does not drag it by the ear. He lifts it up and carries it. Because a lost sheep is a tired sheep. A sheep that has wandered away is a sheep that has been stumbling through rough terrain, exposed to predators, weakened by hunger and fear. By the time the shepherd finds it, the sheep does not have the strength to walk back on its own. So the shepherd carries it on his shoulders, close to his body, all the way home. If you have wandered, if you are lost, if you are too tired to find your way back, Jesus does not expect you to navigate the return journey on your own. He will come to you. He will find you. And when he does, he will not make you walk. He will carry you. That is not a metaphor about general kindness. That is a specific description of what the Good Shepherd does for sheep who have no strength left. He lifts them, he holds them, and he brings them home. And the story does not end with the finding. It ends with a party. The shepherd calls his friends and neighbors together and says, "Rejoice with me, I have found my lost sheep." And Jesus says, "I tell you that in the same way there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who do not need to repent." Heaven throws a party when you come back, not a meeting to discuss your performance review, not a hearing to determine whether you deserve readmission, a party, a celebration, an explosion of joy that reverberates through the halls of eternity because one tired, lost, frightened soul found its way home, or rather was found by the one who never stopped looking. And this compassion for the tired and the overwhelmed is not reserved for the dramatic stories. It shows up in the quiet, almost unremarkable moments too. In the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 9, verse 36, there is a sentence that reveals the emotional life of Jesus in a way that is easy to read past, but impossible to forget once you have really seen it. The text says, "When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd." Harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. That is how Jesus saw the crowds, not as a nuisance, not as a problem to manage, not as an audience to impress. He saw them as people who were being worn down by life, pushed around by forces they could not control, and left without anyone to lead them. And his response was not frustration. It was compassion. The word used in the original language means a deep gut-level stirring. Jesus was moved in his very core by the tiredness of ordinary people. He was not moved by their theological sophistication. He was not impressed by their religious credentials. He was moved by their exhaustion, their helplessness, their lost, shepherdless wandering through a world that was grinding them down, and from that compassion everything else flowed. The teachings, the healings, the parables, the cross, all of it was born from the moment Jesus looked at tired people and felt something so deep it could only be expressed in sacrifice. If you feel harassed tonight, if you feel helpless, if you feel like a sheep without a shepherd, tossed around by circumstances you cannot control and worn out by demands you cannot meet, the gospel says Jesus sees you. And what he feels is not disappointment, it is compassion, the deep, visceral, I will do anything to help you kind of compassion that moved him to heal the sick, feed the hungry, teach the confused, and ultimately die for the guilty. That compassion is not historical. It is present. It is directed at you, right now, in this moment, because the crowds he saw then are the same crowds that exist now, harassed, helpless, tired, and his heart has not changed. And this is why the 23rd Psalm, the most beloved passage in all of Scripture, is not just a poem about peaceful meadows. It is a survival guide for the exhausted soul. The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. That opening line is a declaration of sufficiency in the middle of insufficiency. It does not say I have everything I want, it says I lack nothing. The difference is enormous. It means that in the care of this shepherd, even when you feel empty, even when the cupboard is bare, even when the energy is gone and the hope is thin, you lack nothing. Not because you have stockpiled resources, but because the shepherd himself is your resource. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He makes me. That phrasing is deliberate. A good shepherd does not always wait for the sheep to decide it is time to rest. Sometimes the sheep are too wired, too anxious, too driven by instinct to stop moving, and the shepherd makes them lie down. Not by force, but by leading them to a place so safe, so nourishing, so clearly designed for rest, that the resistance finally breaks and the sheep surrenders. God sometimes leads you into circumstances that are not punishments, but invitations. Invitations to lie down, to stop, to let the green pasture do its work. He leads me beside quiet waters. Not raging rivers, not crashing waves, quiet waters, still waters, the kind that do not threaten, the kind that refresh without overwhelming. If your life feels like a torrent right now, like the water is moving too fast and you cannot keep your footing, the promise of the psalm is that the shepherd knows where the quiet waters are, and he will lead you there, not if you can keep up, not if you perform well enough. He leads, you follow, and the pace is his, not yours. He refreshes my soul, not your body, not your schedule, not your circumstances, your soul, the deepest part of you, the part that is most tired, the part that no amount of vacation or entertainment or distraction can reach. The shepherd refreshes that. He reaches into the place where the tiredness lives and pours something into it that nothing else can provide. And the refreshment is not temporary. It is the kind that goes deep enough to change the quality of everything else. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. The right paths, not the easy paths, not the painless paths, the right paths, and he guides you along them, which means you don't have to figure out the way on your own. You don't have to navigate by guesswork or anxiety. He knows the way, and he walks it with you, every step. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Through the darkest valley, not around it, through it. The psalm does not promise the absence of darkness. It promises the presence of the shepherd in the darkness. And that presence changes the darkness from a place of terror to a place of passage. You are walking through it, not living in it, not stuck in it forever, walking through, and the shepherd is with you every step of the way. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. The rod was a weapon of protection. The staff was a tool of guidance. Both are comforts. The shepherd protects you from what threatens you, and he guides you when you cannot see where to go. That is comfort for the tired soul. Not just a feeling of warmth, but the knowledge that someone stronger is both defending you and directing you. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. A table, a meal, in the middle of the battlefield. God does not wait until the war is over to feed you. He sets a table while the enemies are still circling. That is an audacious kind of provision. It says that God's care for you is not contingent on the resolution of your problems. He takes care of you in the thick of them. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Anointing with oil in the ancient world was an act of honor, healing, and welcome. The shepherd does not just meet your needs, he honors you. He treats you as a guest of value, and the cup does not just fill to the brim, it overflows. There is more than enough. In the care of this shepherd, abundance is not something you earn. It is something that happens when you are close to him. Surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Goodness and love will follow you, not chase you, not hunt you down, follow you, like faithful companions that never leave your side, all the days of your life, not just the good days, all the days, the tired days, the dark days, the days when you can barely get out of bed. Goodness and love are still there, walking behind you, ensuring that even the path you have already traveled is covered by the mercy of God. If you are exhausted, Psalm 23 is not a pleasant devotional to hang on your wall. It is a lifeline. It is the shape of what God promises to every tired soul who is willing to trust him as their shepherd. Green pastures, quiet waters, a refreshed soul, right paths, protection in the valley, provision in the presence of enemies, honor, abundance, goodness and love that never stop following, and a forever home at the end of the journey. That is not a fairy tale. That is the promise of the God who never grows tired. And it is for you. And this promise of provision in the middle of insufficiency brings us to one of the most practical miracles Jesus ever performed. Not practical in the sense of efficient, but practical in the sense of meeting people exactly where they were, with exactly what they needed, at the exact moment when their resources had run out. The feeding of the 5,000, recorded in all 4 Gospels, is the kind of story that is so familiar it can lose its punch. But look at it again through the lens of exhaustion, through the eyes of people who had nothing left. In the Gospel of Mark, chapter 6, Jesus has been teaching a large crowd in a remote place. The day has gone long, the people are far from any town. And the disciples come to Jesus with the kind of tired, pragmatic honesty that you can probably relate to. This is a remote place, and it's already getting late. Send the people away so that they can go to the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat. The disciples are not being selfish. They are being realistic. they are also exhausted. They have been ministering alongside Jesus, and their own tanks are empty. And the sheer logistical impossibility of feeding thousands of people in the middle of nowhere is more than their tired minds can process. Send them away. That is the prayer of every overwhelmed person. This problem is too big for me. Please just make it someone else's problem. But Jesus says, you give them something to eat. The disciples are incredulous. That would take more than half a year's wages. Are we to go and spend that much on bread and give it to them to eat? They are doing the math that tired, anxious people always do, counting the costs, measuring the gaps, calculating how far short they fall. Jesus asks, how many loaves do you have? Go and see. They go and find 5 loaves and 2 fish. 5 and 2. It is almost laughable. Set against 5,000 men, plus women and children, the numbers do not just fail to add up. They are an insult to the size of the problem. 5 loaves and 2 fish is what you pack for a child's lunch, not what you use to feed a multitude. But Jesus takes the 5 loaves and the 2 fish. He looks up to heaven, he gives thanks, and he breaks the bread and begins to distribute it, and everyone eats. Everyone, 5,000 men plus their families. They all eat until they are satisfied. And when the fragments are collected, there are 12 baskets full of leftovers, more than they started with. The multiplication happened in the breaking, not in the abundance. In the breaking, Jesus took what was not enough, gave thanks for it and broke it. And in the breaking, the not enough became more than enough. That pattern matters, because it is the pattern of what God does with every offering that is brought to him in honest insufficiency. If you feel like what you have is not enough, if you feel like your strength, your faith, your resources, your emotional capacity are too small for what is in front of you, the feeding of the 5,000 says that God does not need you to have enough. He needs you to bring what you have, even if it is embarrassingly small, even if it makes no logical sense, even if the gap between what you are holding and what is needed is so vast that offering anything at all feels pointless. Bring it. Let him bless it. Let him break it. And watch what happens when the insufficient meets the infinite. The boy who gave his lunch did not feed 5,000 people. He could not have. But he opened his hands. And Jesus did the rest. That is how it works when you are tired. You do not have to be the miracle. You just have to be willing to let go of the little you have and trust the one who can multiply it. Your depleted offering is not too small for God. It is his preferred starting material. Because when he works with nothing, no one can claim the result was their own doing, and the glory goes where it belongs, not to the one who had enough, but to the one who made enough out of nothing. And this brings us to something that is perhaps the deepest source of tiredness that a human being can carry, deeper than physical fatigue, deeper than emotional burnout, deeper than spiritual dryness. It is the tiredness of guilt, the weight of things you have done, or things that were done to you, or things you failed to do, pressing down on your soul with a heaviness that nothing seems to lift. You have tried to outrun it. You have tried to bury it. You have tried to compensate for it by working harder, being better, proving to yourself and to God that you are not defined by it. But it is still there, and it is making you tired in a way that nothing else can. The Gospel of Mark, chapter 2, tells the story of a man who was paralyzed. He had friends who cared about him, friends who had heard that Jesus was teaching in a house in Capernaum. They carried their friend on a mat because he could not carry himself. When they arrived, the crowd was so thick they could not get through the door. So they went up on the roof, dug through the tiles, and lowered their friend on his mat right in front of Jesus. The audacity of that act is extraordinary, but what Jesus did next is even more so. The text says, when Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralyzed man, "Son, your sins are forgiven." The crowd expected a healing. The friends expected a healing. The paralyzed man probably expected a healing. But Jesus went straight past the physical problem to the spiritual one, because he saw something no one else could see. He saw that this man was carrying something heavier than paralysis. He was carrying guilt, and the guilt was the deeper cage. The body was broken, but the soul was crushed, and Jesus, in his first breath, addressed the thing that hurt the most. Your sins are forgiven. The religious leaders in the room were scandalized. Who can forgive sins but God alone? They muttered. And Jesus, knowing their thoughts, responded with a question of his own. Which is easier, to say to this paralyzed man, "Your sins are forgiven," or to say, "Get up, take your mat and walk"? Then he turned to the man and said, "I tell you, get up, take your mat and go home." And the man stood up, took his mat, and walked out in front of everyone. The physical healing confirmed the authority behind the spiritual one. Jesus could forgive sins because he was who he said he was. And the order matters. The forgiveness came first, before the healing, before the standing up, before the walking. The first thing Jesus did was lift the weight, not the physical weight, the spiritual weight, the guilt, the shame, the thing that was pressing down on this man's soul so heavily that his body had given out under the strain. If you are carrying guilt right now, if the tiredness you feel is connected to something inside you that you cannot forgive yourself for, the paralytic story is not just a miracle narrative. It is a picture of what Jesus came to do. He came to speak into the deepest place of your burden and say, "It is forgiven. You do not have to carry this anymore. I am lifting it off you, not because you earned the lifting, but because I have the authority to do it, and the love to want to." You cannot forgive yourself into freedom. Self-forgiveness is a loop that never closes, because you are both the judge and the defendant, and you keep changing the standards. But the forgiveness of Jesus is not a loop. It is a door. It opens once by his authority, and when you walk through it, the weight stays behind. Not gradually, not partially. The weight stays behind. Your sins are forgiven. Past tense. Done. Completed. Lifted. And the walking that follows is not a reward. It is a result. When the guilt lifts, you find that you can move again. You find that the paralysis was not just in your body. It was in your soul. And the soul that has been forgiven can stand up, pick up the thing it used to lie on, and walk. Not perfectly, not without scars, but freely. And that freedom is the rest that guilt has been stealing from you for as long as you can remember. And this same healing power, this same authority over the things that keep people trapped, shows up again in the story of a man who was tired in a different way. Not tired from guilt, but tired from exclusion. Tired from being defined by his limitations rather than his humanity. Tired from a world that walked past him every single day as if he were part of the furniture. In the Gospel of Mark, chapter 10, a blind man named Bartimaeus is sitting beside the road near Jericho. He is a beggar. His blindness has removed him from the workforce, the community, the normal rhythms of life. He sits by the road and asks for coins from people who barely glance at him. That is his life. Every day, the same spot, the same posture, the same quiet humiliation. And it is exhausting, not because the work is hard, but because the invisibility is relentless. Then he hears that Jesus of Nazareth is passing by, and he starts to shout, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." The people around him tell him to stop. "Be quiet. You are making a scene. You are nobody." He does not want to hear from you. But Bartimaeus does not stop. He shouts louder, because the tiredness of being invisible has reached its limit, and the chance that someone might actually see him is too precious to waste on politeness. And Jesus stops, right in the middle of his journey, right in the middle of the crowd, right in the middle of everything else that was going on. He stops and says, "Call him." 2 words that changed a man's life. Call him. The one everyone else wanted to silence. Bring him to me. Bartimaeus throws off his cloak, jumps to his feet, and comes to Jesus. And Jesus asks him a question that sounds almost too simple. "What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus does not assume. He does not prescribe. He asks. He treats Bartimaeus not as a problem to solve, but as a person to listen to. And Bartimaeus says, "Rabbi, I want to see." Jesus says, "Go, your faith has healed you." And immediately Bartimaeus receives his sight. For the person who has been invisible for too long, who has been sitting beside the road of their own life watching everyone else walk past, who has been defined by what they cannot do rather than who they are, Bartimaeus is the proof that Jesus stops for you. He hears you. Even when everyone else says, "Be quiet," even when the crowd says, "You do not matter," he stops. He turns, he asks what you need, and he acts. Because invisibility is not a permanent condition when Jesus is involved. He has a way of calling people out of the margins and into the center, of giving sight to the blind, voice to the silenced, and dignity to the dismissed. And your tiredness of being overlooked, of being unheard, of being the one who always falls through the cracks, is not something Jesus ignores. It is something that moves him. The Gospels are full of moments where Jesus deliberately turns his attention to the person everyone else has decided is not worth noticing. The leper, the tax collector up a tree, the widow at the funeral, the woman who touched his garment, the children his disciples tried to send away. Jesus has a permanent bias toward the invisible. And if that is where you are, then his gaze is already on you. There is also a tiredness in the Gospels that is rarely discussed, but deeply relevant to anyone who has been faithfully serving for a long time without recognition, without reward, without even a thank you. It is the tiredness of the older brother in the parable of the prodigal son. The story does not end with the younger son's homecoming. It continues with the older brother's reaction. He has been in the field, working. When he comes home and hears the music and dancing, he asks what is happening. A servant tells him that his brother has returned, and their father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound. And the older brother is furious. He refuses to go into the celebration. His father comes out and pleads with him, and the older brother says something that captures a particular kind of exhaustion with devastating accuracy. "Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him. Listen to the language. All these years I've been slaving for you. Not serving, slaving. The older brother has been doing the right things for the right amount of time with the wrong posture. His obedience has become a grind. His faithfulness has become a transaction. And because the transaction has not been paid out in the way he expected, he is bitter, resentful, and utterly exhausted. This is the tiredness of the person who has been doing everything right and feeling nothing for it. The one who shows up to church, reads their Bible, prays, serves, gives, volunteers, and wonders secretly whether any of it matters. The one who watches other people receive grace without effort while they grind away in obedience without celebration. The one who has not run away like the prodigal, but has slowly, quietly lost the joy of being home. The father's response to the older brother is gentle and direct. My son, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. You are always with me. That is not a consolation prize. That is the whole point. The older brother was so focused on what he was not getting that he failed to see what he had. He had the Father's presence. Every day, he had access to the Father's resources. Always. The feast he was angry about was already available to him. He just never asked for it, because he had turned his relationship with the Father into a work arrangement instead of a love affair. If your faith has become a grind, if your tiredness comes from years of obedience that feel more like obligation than joy, the older brother is not a cautionary tale to shame you. He is a mirror to show you where you are, and the Father's response is not a rebuke. It is a reminder. You are always with me. Everything I have is yours. The relationship was always supposed to be the reward. The presence was always supposed to be the celebration. And if you have been working so hard for God that you have forgotten to enjoy God, the invitation is not to work harder. It is to come inside, to join the feast, to remember that you are not a slave. You are a son, a daughter, and everything the Father has is already yours. And there is another kind of tiredness that does not come from overwork or from running or from grief. It comes from shame, the constant, low-grade exhaustion of living with a secret that you cannot tell. The tiredness of carrying something inside you that you believe would cause people to walk away if they knew. It is the tiredness of performing normalcy while your interior world is collapsing. And it is one of the heaviest burdens a human being can carry, because unlike the other kinds of tiredness, this one has no outlet. You cannot rest from shame. You can only carry it day after day until the weight becomes part of you. The Gospel of John, chapter 8, tells a story that speaks directly into this kind of exhaustion. The teachers of the law and the Pharisees bring a woman to Jesus. She has been caught in the act of adultery. They throw her at his feet in front of a crowd and say, "In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now what do you say?" The trap they are setting is for Jesus, not for her. She is a prop, a pawn. Her humiliation is the mechanism by which they hope to discredit him. If Jesus says stone her, they will accuse him of contradicting his own message of mercy. If he says let her go, they will accuse him of dismissing the law. Either way, they think they win. But notice the exhaustion in this scene. Not just the physical danger, but the emotional and spiritual exhaustion of a woman who has been dragged from a private sin into public exposure. Every wall she had built to hide her shame has been torn down in front of everyone. She is standing in the most vulnerable moment a human being can experience, fully known, fully exposed, with nothing to hide behind and no defense to offer. And what does Jesus do? He bends down and starts writing in the dirt with his finger. The text does not tell us what he wrote, but the act itself is extraordinary. In the middle of a shouting crowd, with stones in their hands and blood in their eyes, Jesus does not shout back. He does not argue. He does not match their intensity. He bends down. He gets lower. He draws in the dirt as if to say, I will not play your game, and I will not participate in your violence. Then he stands up and says one sentence that empties every hand of its stone. Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her. And one by one, starting with the oldest, the accusers walk away, until it is just Jesus and the woman, alone. He asks her, Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you? She says, No one, sir. And Jesus says, Then neither do I condemn you. Go now and leave your life of sin. The order of those sentences is the gospel in miniature. The freedom comes before the instruction. The grace comes before the challenge. He does not say, Fix your life, and then I will not condemn you. He says, I do not condemn you. Now go, live differently. The love is the foundation. The change grows out of the love, not the other way around. If you are carrying shame right now, if the tiredness you feel is the tiredness of a secret that you believe would destroy you if it came to light, Jesus does not stand over you with a stone. He bends down, he gets lower than you are, and from that position, from the dirt, he speaks to the accusers in your head and says, Where are they? Has no one condemned you? Then neither do I. That is not a free pass to keep living in a way that is destroying you. It is the power to stop, because you cannot stop from a place of terror. You can only stop from a place of love. And Jesus gives you the love first, so that the stopping becomes possible. Your shame is not your identity. The worst thing you have done is not your definition. The secret you are keeping does not have the power to separate you from the love of God, because the love of God in Christ Jesus is stronger than your sin, wider than your shame, deeper than your worst moment. And the one who spoke those words to the woman in the dirt speaks them to you right now. Neither do I condemn you. Let those words land where the tiredness lives, and let them begin to do their work. And if your tiredness comes not from what you have done, but from what has been done to you, if the exhaustion you carry is the result of being beaten down by life, by circumstances, by other people's cruelty, by systems that were supposed to protect you, but instead left you broken on the side of the road, then there is a parable that Jesus told that speaks directly to where you are. The parable of the Good Samaritan, found in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 10, is usually taught as a lesson about helping others. And it is. But if you read it from the perspective of the man who was beaten, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes a picture of what it feels like to be helpless, and what it looks like when God refuses to leave you there. A man is traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho when he falls into the hands of robbers. They strip him of his clothes, beat him, and leave him half dead beside the road. He cannot help himself. He cannot call for help. He is lying in the dust, broken and bleeding, waiting for someone to notice. A priest comes along. He sees the man and passes by on the other side. A Levite comes along. He sees the man and passes by on the other side. Two religious leaders, two men whose entire vocational identity is built on the service of God and the care of people, walk past a dying man because helping him would be inconvenient, or because it would make them ceremonially unclean, or because they were afraid. Whatever the reason, they chose their comfort over his life. And then a Samaritan comes. A Samaritan. To the Jewish audience hearing this story, the Samaritan is the last person who should be the hero. Samaritans were despised. They were considered heretics, half-breeds, enemies. But it is the Samaritan who stops. He bandages the man's wounds, pouring on oil and wine. He puts the man on his own donkey, takes him to an inn, and takes care of him. The next day he pays the innkeeper and promises to cover any additional expenses. If you are the person on the road, if life has beaten you and stripped you and left you half dead, and the people who should have helped walked past, the parable says that God does not leave you there. He sends help from the most unexpected direction, not from the religious establishment, not from the people you expected to care, from the place you least expect. And the help does not just stabilize you and leave. It picks you up, it carries you, it pays for your healing, it promises to come back. And in the deepest reading of this parable, Jesus himself is the Good Samaritan. He is the one who was rejected by the religious establishment, despised by the powerful, and yet he is the one who stops for the broken. He is the one who bends down beside you on the road. He is the one who pours oil on your wounds and bandages them. He is the one who lifts you onto his own shoulders and carries you to safety. He is the one who pays the full price of your recovery, not with silver coins, but with his own blood. If you are lying on the side of the road tonight, too broken to move, too beaten to call for help, too exhausted to hope that anyone will notice, the Good Samaritan has already stopped. He has already seen you. He is already bending down, and the care he offers is not conditional. It does not depend on your ability to thank him or repay him or even recognize him. It depends on who he is, and who he is from beginning to end is love. And there is one more scene in the Gospels that speaks to the tired person with a tenderness that's easy to miss. In the Gospel of Mark, chapter 10, people are bringing little children to Jesus for him to place his hands on them and bless them. The disciples rebuke them. They tell the parents to stop. Jesus is too important for this. He has bigger things to do. Children are a distraction, a nuisance. But Jesus is indignant. The text uses a strong word. He's genuinely upset with his own disciples, and he says, "Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these." Truly, I tell you, anyone who does not receive the kingdom of God like a little child will never enter it. What does it mean to receive the kingdom like a little child? It means to come with empty hands. It means to come without pretense. It means to come without a resume of accomplishments or a portfolio of religious achievements. A child does not earn love. A child receives love. A child does not negotiate for provision. A child trusts that the parent will provide. A child does not analyze the theology of rest before lying down. A child simply climbs into the lap and falls asleep. That is how Jesus wants you to come to him, not as an accomplished adult who has earned the right to be tired, as a child who is simply exhausted and needs to be held. You do not need to understand everything about grace before you receive it. You do not need to have a perfect prayer before you approach. You just need to come, like a child, with empty hands and a tired body and a heart that is too small to carry what the world has put on it. Come, and let the one who said, "The kingdom belongs to such as these," receive you the way a good father receives a tired child, without interrogation, without conditions, with open arms and a gentle voice that says, "I have you, you can rest now." And what Jesus said next is equally powerful. He took the children in his arms, placed his hands on them, and blessed them. He did not just tolerate them. He held them, he touched them, he spoke goodness over them. That is the posture of Jesus toward the tired and the small and the overlooked. He does not grudgingly accept you into his presence. He holds you, he blesses you, he speaks life over you. And the blessing does not depend on your strength or your maturity or your track record. It depends on his nature, and his nature is love. If you feel small tonight, if you feel like a child who has been carrying an adult's burden, Jesus is not irritated by your smallness. He is indignant with anyone or anything that has tried to keep you from coming to him. Let them come, he says. Do not hinder them. Whatever has been standing between you and Jesus, whether it is your own sense of unworthiness, the judgment of others, the weight of religious expectation, or the sheer exhaustion of trying to be good enough, Jesus removes it. Let them come. Nothing stands in the way when Jesus opens his arms, and his arms are open right now for you. And this is where Jesus uses an image that speaks to the tired person with a clarity that no other metaphor in Scripture quite matches. In the Gospel of John, chapter 15, on the final night before his arrest, Jesus tells his disciples, "I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. Apart from me, you can do nothing." That sentence should be the most liberating thing a tired person has ever heard. Because it means the pressure is off. It means that the fruit of your life, the good things, the spiritual growth, the impact, the love, the patience, the kindness, none of it depends on you mustering up the energy to produce it. It depends on your connection to the vine. The branch does not strain to produce grapes. The branch receives sap from the vine, and the grapes appear naturally. The branch's job is not production, it is connection. If you have been trying to produce fruit from your own exhausted reserves, if you have been squeezing yourself dry, trying to generate spiritual outcomes through sheer willpower, Jesus is not asking you to try harder. He is asking you to stay connected. Remain in me. Abide in me. That is not a command to do more. It is a command to be closer. The tiredness you feel may not be a sign that you need more discipline. It may be a sign that you have been trying to produce fruit while disconnected from the vine. And the solution is not to push harder. The solution is to draw nearer. Remain in my love, Jesus continues. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and your joy may be complete. His joy in you, complete, not partial, not conditional, complete. The joy of Christ is not something you manufacture through effort. It is something that flows into you when you are connected to him. And the completeness of that joy is not dependent on your circumstances. It is dependent on your proximity to the vine. This means that rest, Real rest, soul-level rest, is not something you find by escaping your life. It is something you find by abiding in Jesus within your life. You can be in the middle of a difficult season, a demanding job, a painful relationship, a confusing circumstance, and still experience the rest of someone who is connected to the vine. Because the rest does not come from the absence of difficulty. It comes from the presence of Christ. And Christ is not somewhere far away waiting for you to arrive. He is the vine, and you are already in him if you have placed your trust in him. The abiding is not about reaching a new location. It is about recognizing where you already are. And there is something else Jesus said on that final night that the tired soul needs to hear. In John chapter 14, he tells his grieving, confused, frightened disciples, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. My Father's house has many rooms. If that were not so, would I have told you that I am going there to prepare a place for you?" He is going to prepare a place. That means the future is not empty. It is not a void that you are hurtling toward without purpose. There is a room being prepared for you by the hands of a carpenter. The same hands that shaped wood in a Nazareth workshop are shaping a home for you in eternity. And the one who is preparing it knows your exact specifications, not the size of your bank account, not the impressiveness of your resume, your soul. He knows what your soul needs, and he is building a place that fits. And then he says, "I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am." He is coming back. This is not the end. This life, with all its tiredness and pain and struggle, is not the final chapter. There is a homecoming ahead, and the one who promised it is the one who rose from the dead. His promises have a track record, and the day he returns to take you to the place he has prepared, every ounce of tiredness will fall away like a coat dropped at the door, because you will be home with him, and there will be no more night, no more tears, no more pain, no more exhaustion. Just the eternal rest of being in the presence of the one who loves you perfectly. But until that day, the tiredness continues, and the gospel does not pretend otherwise. In this world you will have trouble, Jesus said in John chapter 16, verse 33. He did not sugarcoat it. He did not promise that following him would be comfortable. He said plainly that trouble is part of the package. But then he added 5 words that change everything. But take heart, I have overcome the world. Take heart, not because the trouble is an illusion, not because you will be spared from difficulty. Take heart because the one who is with you has already won. The battle is decided, the outcome is settled. Death could not hold him, sin could not stain him, the grave could not contain him. He has overcome. And because he has, every trouble you face, no matter how overwhelming, is a defeated trouble. It may still hurt, it may still exhaust you, but it does not have the final word. He does. And this brings us back to something about Jesus that the tired person needs to see one more time before we move toward the cross. It is the way he treated the leper. In the Gospel of Mark chapter 1, a man with leprosy comes to Jesus and kneels before him. "If you are willing," the man says, "you can make me clean." That is a prayer soaked in exhaustion, years of isolation, years of shouting unclean to anyone who came near, years of being defined by a disease rather than recognized as a person. And the prayer itself carries the weight of a man who is not sure he is worth the effort. "If you are willing," as if to say, "I know you can, but will you?" For me, for someone like me. And Jesus, filled with compassion, does something that no one in that crowd expected. He reaches out and touches him. He touches the leper. In a world where touching a leper made you ceremonially unclean, where it could get you expelled from the synagogue, where it violated every social and religious boundary, Jesus reached out and touched the man who had not been touched in years, maybe decades, and he said, "I am willing, be clean." The healing is instant, but the touch is the real miracle, because the touch happened before the healing. Jesus did not wait until the man was clean to touch him. He touched him while he was still unclean. He put his hand on the very thing that everyone else recoiled from, and in doing so, he said something that no word alone could have communicated. "You are not repulsive to me. You're not too dirty, too broken, too contaminated for my touch. I am willing. I am willing to get close to the thing that scares everyone else, because you are worth it." If you feel untouchable right now, if there is something about your life, your past, your body, your mind, your failures that makes you feel like you are standing outside the camp shouting unclean, the touch of Jesus is for you. He does not heal from a safe distance. He steps into the mess. He puts his hand on the wound, and he says, "I am willing. Be clean." Not, "I am willing after you have figured things out." Not, "I am willing once you have proven you deserve it." He is willing now, in the middle of the uncleanness, in the middle of the exhaustion, in the middle of the mess that you think disqualifies you. He is willing, and his willingness has never been in question. The tiredness you carry does not make you untouchable. It makes you exactly the kind of person Jesus stops for. The Gospels are proof. Every story, every teaching, every miracle, every parable is aimed at people who have come to the end of their own resources. And at the end of your resources, standing at the bottom of your empty barrel with nothing left to offer, you will find Jesus. Not standing above you with his arms crossed, standing beside you with his arms open, ready to touch what everyone else has avoided, ready to speak life into what everyone else has declared dead, ready to carry what you can no longer hold. And that readiness, that willingness, that constant, tireless, inexhaustible compassion is what carried him all the way to the cross, because the cross was not an accident. It was the destination. Everything Jesus said, every person he healed, every parable he told, every meal he shared, every tear he shed, was moving toward the place where he would take the weight of the entire world onto his own shoulders. And he did it willingly. For the joy set before him, the writer of Hebrews says, he endured the cross, the joy of bringing you home, the joy of lifting your burden, the joy of saying to every exhausted, guilty, ashamed, afraid, lonely soul, "It is finished. You do not have to carry this anymore. I have carried it for you." And there is something Jesus said about rest that the tired person needs to hear in its original context, because it has been buried under centuries of religious debate about rules and has lost the radical compassion it originally carried. In the Gospel of Mark, chapter 2, the Pharisees confront Jesus because his disciples are picking grain on the Sabbath. In their interpretation of the law, this constituted work, and work on the Sabbath was forbidden. The Sabbath had become, in the hands of the religious authorities, another burden, another rule, another test to pass. The day that God had designed for rest had been turned into a minefield of regulations that made rest impossible. And Jesus says something that should be carved into the doorpost of every exhausted believer's heart. The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Stop and let that settle. The Sabbath, the day of rest, was created for you, not the other way around. You were not created to serve the rule. The rule was created to serve you. God looked at the human beings he had made and knew that they would run themselves into the ground if they were not given permission to stop. So he built rest into the fabric of creation, not as a test of obedience, as a gift of love. He said, "One day in 7, you stop. You put down the tools. You leave the field. You come away from the work, not because the work is unimportant, but because you are more important than the work. And your soul needs space to breathe." The religious leaders had taken that gift and turned it into a cage. They had built so many rules around the Sabbath that the day of rest had become the most stressful day of the week. And Jesus, with a single sentence, cut through the entire system and returned rest to its original purpose. It was made for you, for your benefit, for your healing, for your sanity, for the protection of your body and your soul against the relentless grind of a world that will take everything you have if you let it. If you have been feeling guilty about resting, if the voice in your head says that stopping means failing, that slowing down means falling behind, that taking a break means you are not serious about God or about life, that voice is not from Jesus. Jesus is the one who said the Sabbath was made for you. He built rest into the order of creation. He honored it in his own life. And he fought against the people who turned it into another form of bondage. Rest is not the enemy of faithfulness, it is the foundation of it. And Jesus defended your right to it with the kind of passion he usually reserved for the things that mattered most. And the writer of Hebrews, in chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, uses an image that brings everything together for the person who is tired but still trying to follow Jesus. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. There is so much here for the tired person. First, you are surrounded. You are not alone. There is a cloud of witnesses, every person who has ever walked this path before you, who lived and struggled and doubted and persevered, and now stands on the other side, cheering you on. You may feel isolated in your tiredness, but you are surrounded by the company of the faithful. Their stories are your encouragement. Their endurance is your proof that the race can be finished. Second, throw off everything that hinders. Not everything, the things that hinder. There are things you are carrying that you don't need to carry. Expectations that were placed on you by other people. Standards that you adopted from a culture that does not care about your soul. Habits that drain you without giving anything back. Relationships that take without giving. Commitments that you said yes to out of guilt rather than calling. These are the weights, and the instruction is not to examine them carefully and decide which ones to keep. It is to throw them off, drop them, let them fall. You are in a race, and you cannot run with weights on your shoulders that were never part of the course. Third, run with perseverance, not with speed, not with perfection, with perseverance. The ability to keep going when you want to quit. That is the only requirement. Not that you run fast, not that you run without stumbling, that you keep running, or walking, or crawling. Whatever forward motion you can manage, that counts. Perseverance is not about pace, it is about direction, and as long as you are moving toward Jesus, you are in the race. And fourth, fix your eyes on Jesus, not on the crowd, not on the other runners, not on the finish line in the distance, not on the obstacles in your path, on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of your faith. He is the one who went first. He is the one who finished the course. He is the one who endured the cross, not because it was easy, but because the joy set before him, the joy of bringing you home, was worth the pain. And now he is seated. He sat down. The work is complete. He is resting, and he invites you into that rest, not at the end of the race, along the way. Every time you lift your eyes to him, you find strength for the next step. Because the race is not about proving yourself. It is about following him. And he has never run too fast for you to keep up. The pace of Jesus is not the pace of the world. The world says faster. Jesus says, follow me. The world says more. Jesus says enough. The world says, prove yourself. Jesus says, I already love you. And the rhythm of a life lived at the pace of Jesus is not frantic. It is steady. It is the rhythm of someone who knows where they are going and trusts the one who is leading. It is the rhythm of rest built into movement, of prayer built into work, of stillness built into activity. It is the rhythm of the vine and the branches, where the fruit comes not from straining, but from abiding. You can live at that pace, not because your circumstances will magically become easier, but because the one who sets the pace is gentle and humble in heart. And his yoke fits, and his burden is light, and he has never once asked you to carry more than you can bear. The things that have been crushing you may not all be from him. Some of them may be yokes that were placed on you by a world that does not know what rest looks like. And Jesus offers a trade. His yoke for yours, his burden for yours, his pace for yours. And in the exchange, you find something you had forgotten was possible. You find rest. Not at the end of the road. On the road, in the middle of the journey, with the shepherd beside you and the pasture underfoot and the quiet waters ahead. That is what Jesus offers to the tired person. Not a harder path with a better reward, a different kind of path altogether, one where the walking is sustained, one where the falling is caught, one where the failing is forgiven, one where the carrying is shared, one where the resting is built in, and one where the destination is not a place but a person, and that person is already with you. And all of this, the tenderness toward the tired, the compassion for the exhausted, the patience with the weak, the provision for the depleted, everything Jesus said and did and modeled about rest leads inevitably to the place where he himself became the most tired. The cross. And the cross is not just the climax of the gospel story. It is the ultimate answer to every kind of tiredness there is. Jesus carried his cross through the streets of Jerusalem after being beaten, mocked, flogged, crowned with thorns, and condemned to death. The Roman scourging alone was brutal enough to kill many prisoners. The whip was designed to shred flesh, embedded with bone and metal fragments that tore the skin open with every stroke. Jesus survived that, and then he was given a beam to carry. The physical weight of that beam was enormous, but the spiritual weight was infinitely greater, because on the cross, Jesus was not just carrying wood. He was carrying the sins of the world, every act of cruelty, every betrayal, every lie, every hidden shame, every whispered hatred, every broken promise, every unconfessed guilt that has ever weighed down a human soul was transferred to him. The prophet Isaiah described it centuries before it happened. Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering. He was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. He took up our pain. He bore our suffering. The tiredness you feel right now, the weight that you have been carrying, the burden that has pressed down on you until you can barely breathe. Jesus knows what it feels like. Not theoretically, not from observation. He felt it in his own body. He staggered under it on the road to Golgotha. He fell. The Gospels tell us that the soldiers had to pull a man from the crowd, Simon of Cyrene, to carry the cross the rest of the way because Jesus could no longer bear it alone. The Son of God needed help carrying the weight. Think about that for a moment. If Jesus himself needed someone to help him carry the cross, then your need for help is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign that you are human, and it is a sign that the burden you are carrying may not be yours to carry alone. Sometimes God sends a Simon into your life, a person who comes alongside you not because they understand everything, but because they are willing to share the weight. And accepting that help is not a failure of faith. It is an imitation of Christ. At Golgotha, Jesus was nailed to the cross. The nails went through his wrists and his feet. Crucifixion was designed by the Roman Empire to be the most painful, humiliating, and prolonged form of execution ever devised. The victim hung suspended between heaven and earth, unable to find relief. Every breath required pushing up against the nails in the feet to lift the chest enough to inhale. Every exhalation brought the body back down, pulling against the nails in the wrists. The cycle of pain was unrelenting. Death came slowly over hours, sometimes days, and it was from that cross, in that state of ultimate human exhaustion, that Jesus said the things that matter most to every tired soul. The first word from the cross recorded in the Gospel of Luke is a prayer. Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. Forgive them while they are killing him, while the nails are in his hands, while the crowd is shouting insults, while the soldiers are gambling for his clothes, while his mother is watching from below with a grief that no one should ever have to bear. In the deepest moment of his suffering, his first instinct was not retaliation. It was not anger. It was forgiveness. If Jesus can forgive from the cross, then there is nothing in your life that is beyond the reach of his mercy. Nothing you have done that he cannot cover. Nothing that has been done to you that he does not see. The forgiveness he offered on the cross was not conditional. It was not earned. It was not limited to the people who apologized. He forgave people who did not even know they needed forgiving. And that same forgiveness, spoken into the air above Golgotha 2,000 years ago, is still active, still available, still powerful enough to reach into the darkest room of your guilt and say, this too is covered. And then there is the conversation with the thief. 2 criminals were crucified alongside Jesus, one on his left and one on his right. One of them mocked him, the other did not. The Gospel of Luke records what happened. The second criminal rebuked the first and then turned to Jesus and said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." It is one of the most exhausted prayers in the Bible. The man is dying. He is in agony. He has no good works to point to, no lifetime of faithfulness, no theological training, no time to change his life. He has nothing but a name and a request. "Jesus, remember me." 2 words and a whisper. That is all his depleted body and depleted soul can manage. And Jesus responds, "Truly, I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." Today, not after you have done penance, not after you have proven yourself, not after a probationary period in some spiritual waiting room. Today, this very day, before the sun goes down on this horror, you will be with me in paradise, the same paradise that the Son of God will enter. You will be there, not as a servant in the back, as a guest, a saved soul, a citizen of the kingdom. Today, that criminal did nothing to earn his salvation. He had no opportunity to earn it. He could not get baptized, could not attend a service, could not tithe, could not volunteer, could not do a single religious act. He could only turn his tired, broken face toward Jesus and whisper a request. And it was enough. It was more than enough, because salvation was never about what you bring. It was always about who you come to. And the thief on the cross came to the right person at the last possible moment. And Jesus said yes. If you are worried that you are too late, too far gone, too spent, too sinful, too exhausted to be saved, the thief on the cross is the permanent rebuttal to that lie. There is no cut-off. There is no limit. There is no bottom that is too deep for the grace of Christ to reach. If a dying criminal with nothing to offer and no time to change can receive paradise by simply turning to Jesus, then your situation, whatever it is not too much for him. And then came the words that changed everything. Near the end, after hours of agony, after the sky had gone dark and the earth had trembled, Jesus said, "It is finished." And he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. It is finished. In the original Greek, the word is tetelestai. It was a word used in the marketplace to mean paid in full. When a debt was settled, the creditor would stamp the receipt with tetelestai. It was a word used by artists when a piece was completed. It was a word that meant the work is done. Not paused, not mostly done, finished, complete, nothing left to add. That is what Jesus declared from the cross. The work of salvation, the bridge between a holy God and a broken humanity, the payment for every sin that has ever been committed or ever will be committed, is finished. It is done. And it is done not by you, but by him. You do not have to add to it. You do not have to supplement it with your own goodness. You do not have to strain and strive and exhaust yourself trying to earn what has already been paid for. It is finished. For the tired soul who has been trying to make themselves acceptable to God through effort, through performance, through moral achievement, through religious discipline, those 2 words should feel like chains falling off your wrists. It is finished. The striving can stop. The performance is over, not because you do not matter, but because the one who matters most has already done everything that needed to be done. And your response is not to work harder. Your response is to rest, to trust, to receive what has been freely given and let it change you from the inside out. And the cross is not the end. The cross is the deepest, darkest point of the story, but it is not the conclusion. Because 3 days later, something happened that turned the universe inside out. On the morning of the 3rd day, Women who had followed Jesus went to the tomb where his body had been laid. They expected to find a corpse. They expected to anoint a dead body with spices, to perform the final act of love for a friend they had lost. They expected grief to be the only thing waiting for them at the end of the road. But the stone had been rolled away, and the tomb was empty, and a messenger said words that no one could have predicted or invented. He is not here. He has risen. He has risen. Jesus, the one who was beaten, mocked, spat on, nailed to a cross, pierced with a spear, and sealed in a tomb, was alive. Not metaphorically alive, not alive in memory or in spirit, physically, bodily, completely alive. He walked out of the tomb the way he walked into Lazarus's house, the way he walked through Samaria, the way he walked up the mountain to teach the Beatitudes. He walked, he spoke, he ate, he was touched, he was real, and he was alive. The resurrection is the answer to the deepest kind of tiredness there is. The tiredness that says nothing ever really changes. Everything good ends. Every hope eventually dies. There is no point in believing because the grave always wins. The resurrection says no. The grave does not win. Death does not get the final word. The worst thing that can happen, the murder of the most innocent man who ever lived, is not the end of the story. It is the set-up for the greatest reversal in the history of the universe. And the resurrection is not just something that happened to Jesus. It is something that is promised to everyone who trusts in him. I am the resurrection and the life, he told Martha before raising Lazarus from the dead. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. That is not a comforting platitude. That is a promise backed by someone who has personally defeated the thing he is promising to save you from. If anyone has the right to promise life beyond death, it is the one who has been dead and is now alive. For the person listening who is tired all the way to the bone, tired of fighting, tired of hoping, tired of trying, the resurrection does not say, "You will never feel tired again." It says something better. It says that the tiredness is not permanent. It says that the grave does not get the final word over your pain, your loss, your failure, or your exhaustion. It says that the one who walked out of the tomb on Sunday morning has the power to walk into your Monday morning and bring life where there was only death. And after his resurrection, Jesus appeared to his disciples. He ate with them, he taught them, he restored them. He did not appear in a flash of divine glory and demand their worship. He came to them gently. He came to them in the ordinary places, in a locked room, on a road, at a beach, and he came to them with exactly what they needed. Not a lecture about their failure to stay awake in the garden or their cowardice in running away when he was arrested. He came with peace. His first word to them, the first thing he said when he appeared in their midst after rising from the dead, was, "Peace be with you." Not, "Where were you?" Not, "How dare you abandon me?" Peace be with you. Right now, after everything, peace. And to Peter, the one who had denied him 3 times, he did not bring up the betrayal. He came to the beach where Peter was fishing. He cooked breakfast, fish and bread on a charcoal fire, and then he asked one question 3 times. "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" 3 times, once for each denial, and each time Peter said yes, and each time Jesus responded with a commission. "Feed my lambs. Take care of my sheep. Feed my sheep." Restoration, not condemnation. Purpose, not punishment. A future, not a review of the past. Jesus looked at the man who had failed him most publicly and gave him the most important job in the early church. Because failure is not disqualification when Jesus is involved. It is raw material for redemption. And the tired, ashamed, guilt-ridden Peter who sat on that beach became the foundation of a movement that has been changing the world for 2,000 years. If you feel like your failures have used up your usefulness, if you are too tired and too ashamed to imagine that God could still use you, the restoration of Peter is a direct challenge to that belief. Jesus does not retire the people who fail. He feeds them breakfast and gives them a new assignment. He does not erase the failure. He redeems it. He does not pretend it did not happen. He makes it the hinge on which the next chapter turns. Your worst moment is not your last chapter, not when Jesus is writing the story. And so now we come back to the place where this began, to you, to the tiredness you are carrying right now, to the honest prayer that brought you here. God, I feel tired. You have walked through the words and the life of Jesus. You have seen that he himself knew tiredness from the inside, that he sat at wells when he was too weary to keep walking, that he withdrew to solitary places when the demands of the world were too heavy, that he slept in boats while storms raged, that he understood the weakness of the flesh and did not condemn it, that he fed the hungry, forgave the guilty, healed the broken, restored the fallen, and carried the weight of the world to a cross, and that on the other side of that cross there was a tomb, and on the other side of the tomb there was life. But what does all of that mean for you right now in the specific shape of tiredness you are living through? Maybe your tiredness is physical. Your body has been running at a pace it was not designed for. You have been sleeping too little, working too much, pushing through pain because the bills do not pay themselves and the responsibilities do not disappear just because you need a break. You are running on caffeine and obligation, and somewhere underneath the functioning adult exterior, your body is quietly begging you to stop. If that is you, then the withdrawal of Jesus into solitude is not just a nice story. It is a prescription. You need rest. Real, physical, guilt-free rest. Not rest that you earn after finishing one more task. Rest that you take because you need it. The way you eat because you are hungry. The way you drink because you are thirsty. Your body is not a machine. It is a gift. And gifts need care. When Jesus said, "Come to me, all you who are weary, and I will give you rest," he was not speaking only about spiritual rest. He was speaking to the whole person, body, mind, and soul, and the whole person needs to stop sometimes. The world will tell you that stopping is irresponsible, that rest is for the lazy, that if you are not productive, you are not valuable. But the world does not know you. Jesus does. And Jesus, who could have spent every waking moment healing people and teaching crowds, chose to sleep, to eat, to sit by water, to spend time with friends. He built rest into the rhythm of his life, not as an afterthought, but as a practice. And if the one who had the most important mission in history took time to rest, then your rest is not a luxury. It is a necessity that even God honors. Maybe your tiredness is emotional. You have been carrying the feelings of other people for so long that you have lost track of your own. You are the listener, the counselor, the shoulder, the strong one. People lean on you because you let them, and you let them because you do not know who you would be if you were not useful. But the constant absorbing of other people's pain has left you hollow. You have given so much empathy that you have none left for yourself. And the loneliness of being the one who holds everyone together while no one holds you is a special kind of exhaustion that most people do not even know exists. If that is you, then Martha's story is more than a lesson about priorities. It is a rescue. Because what Jesus said to Martha was not just, "Come sit down." It was, "You're more than what you do for others. Your presence matters more than your performance. And right now, the best thing you can do is stop doing and start being." The world needs people who give. But God does not want you to give yourself away until there is nothing left. He wants you to receive, to sit at His feet, to let someone else carry the weight for a moment while you are simply present, simply loved, simply still. And there is a kind of rest that goes beyond physical rest and emotional rest. It is the rest that comes from releasing the need to control the outcome. The tiredness that so many people carry is not just from doing too much. It is from worrying about what will happen if they stop. What if things fall apart? What if no one else picks up the slack? What if the worst-case scenario becomes reality while you are resting? That fear of what will happen when you let go is itself a source of crushing exhaustion. Jesus addressed this directly. "Do not worry about tomorrow," He said in the Gospel of Matthew chapter 6. "For tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own." That is not naivety. That is trust. It is the radical trust of someone who believes that the God who sustains the universe is capable of sustaining one more day of your life without your constant intervention. Tomorrow has not arrived yet. The energy you are spending on it is energy you do not have for today, and today is where you actually live. Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? Jesus asks. And the answer is obvious. No, worry has never added a thing. It has never prevented a single disaster. It has never solved a single problem. All it has done is stolen the peace that could have been yours while the day was still in God's hands. And the most radical act of faith you can perform right now might not be a prayer or a fasting or a bold declaration of trust. It might simply be going to sleep, closing your eyes and saying, "God, I am letting go." Not because I am sure everything will be fine, but because I am sure that you are in control even when I am unconscious. And if you can hold the stars in place without my help, you can hold my life together while I rest. That is not laziness. That is the deepest expression of trust available to a tired human being. And it is the kind of rest Jesus was talking about when He said, "Come to me, all you who are weary, and I will give you rest." Let us return to that invitation one more time, because there is a part of it that is often overlooked, and it speaks directly to the experience of the person who is tired not just from life but from religion. Jesus said, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." A yoke, in the agricultural world of first-century Israel, was a wooden beam placed across the shoulders of two animals so they could plow a field together. When Jesus says, "Take my yoke upon you," He is not adding another burden. He is inviting you into a partnership. A yoke connects two. When you take the yoke of Jesus, you are not pulling alone. You are harnessed to someone infinitely stronger, who bears the weight, who sets the pace, who determines the direction. Your job is not to drag the plow by yourself. Your job is to stay connected. And when you do, something miraculous happens. The work that was crushing you when you were doing it alone becomes light, not because the work disappears, because the partnership changes everything. My yoke is easy, Jesus says. The word in the original language does not just mean not hard, it means well-fitting. A good carpenter, which Jesus was, would custom make a yoke for each pair of animals, shaping it so it did not chafe, did not rub, did not cause pain. When Jesus says his yoke is easy, he is saying it is designed specifically for you. It fits your shape. It matches your stride. It does not dig into your shoulders the way the world's yoke does. The demands of the culture, the expectations of the system, the standards of the religious establishment, those yokes were heavy and ill-fitting, and they left people raw and bleeding. But the yoke of Jesus was made by a carpenter who knows your frame, and it fits. And my burden is light. Not non-existent, light. There is still a load. Following Jesus does not mean floating through life without weight. But the weight you carry in partnership with him is fundamentally different from the weight you carry alone. Because he carries the heavy end he always has, and your portion, the part that you hold, is light enough to carry without being crushed. If your faith has been exhausting you, if the religious expectations that surround you have been grinding you down, if you have been wearing a yoke that does not fit and calling it obedience, Jesus offers a trade. Give me that yoke, the one that is heavy and harsh and leaves you broken. Take mine instead. It is easy, it is light, it was made for you, by someone who is gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your soul. That is not just rest for your body or rest for your schedule, rest for your soul, the deepest part of you, the part that is most tired, the part that has been carrying weight it was never designed to carry. That part of you can rest, not in the future, not when you get your life together, now, because Jesus is offering it now, and his offer does not expire. Maybe you are listening to this in the dark. Maybe the room is quiet and the world outside is still, and you are lying in a place where you feel more alone than you have ever felt before. Maybe the tiredness has been with you so long that it has become part of your identity. You do not remember what it felt like to not be tired. You do not remember what it felt like to wake up with hope instead of dread. You do not remember the last time your faith felt like joy instead of duty. And the thought of one more morning feels like a weight you cannot bear. If that is where you are, then hear this. Jesus is not far from you. He is not on the other side of a religious obstacle course that you have to complete before he will show up. He is here, in the dark room, in the silence, in the exhaustion. He is the shepherd who finds the lost sheep in the ravine and carries it home. He is the father who sees the prodigal from a long way off and runs. He is the healer who stops for the woman who has been bleeding for 12 years. He is the friend who cooks breakfast for the one who denied him. He is the Savior who gives paradise to the dying criminal who has nothing to offer except a whisper. He is here, and he is not asking you to do anything right now. He is not asking you to pray a perfect prayer. He is not asking you to muster up energy you do not have. He is not asking you to perform, to prove, to produce, or to pretend. He is asking you to receive, to let his peace into the room, to let his word settle over you the way a blanket settles over a shivering body, to let the truth that he sees you, knows you, and loves you do its work in the place where the tiredness lives. The Apostle Paul, who knew exhaustion intimately, who was beaten, imprisoned, shipwrecked, stoned, hungry, cold, and constantly in danger, wrote something to the church in Philippi that captures the kind of peace Jesus offers. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. The peace of God transcends understanding. It does not require comprehension. It does not wait for you to figure out how it works. It shows up when you present your requests, your tired, messy, half-coherent requests, and it guards you, guards your heart, guards your mind, like a sentry standing outside the door of your soul, keeping out the anxiety, the dread, the spiraling thoughts that have been stealing your rest. That peace is not something you manufacture. It is something that descends, and it descends when you stop trying to handle everything and start handing everything to God. And Paul also wrote in his second letter to the Corinthians something that every tired person needs to hear. Therefore, we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. You are being renewed, even when you feel like you are wasting away, even when the tiredness is so deep that you can feel it in your bones. Something is happening inside you that does not show up on the surface. A renewal, a rebuilding, a work that God is doing in the hidden places of your soul while the visible you feels like it is falling apart. The tiredness is real. The renewal is more real. And the glory that is being forged in this dark furnace of exhaustion is not light or momentary, even though your troubles are. The glory is eternal. The tiredness is not. So do not lose heart. Those are not the words of someone who is dismissing your pain. They are the words of someone who has been through pain and come out the other side with a perspective that only suffering can teach. Don't lose heart. Not because the tiredness does not matter, but because the tiredness is not the whole story, and the unseen things, the things God is doing that you cannot feel yet, are heavier on the scale than everything you are going through. And this is where the gospel meets you in your tiredness and says something that no self-help book, no motivational speaker, and no human being can say with the authority to back it up. You are held, not by your own strength, not by your own effort, not by your own ability to keep going. You are held by the one who holds the entire universe together and does not get tired doing it. The prophet Isaiah said it clearly. The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary. He does not grow tired. That is not just a statement about God's power. It is a statement about his constancy. When you are exhausted, he is not. When you run out, he does not. When your grip loosens and your strength fails and you feel like you are slipping, he does not slip. He does not lose his grip. He does not grow weary of holding you. His strength is infinite, and it is directed in this moment at the specific place where you are weakest. And in the New Testament, the writer of Hebrews echoes this truth with a specificity that should stop every tired person in their tracks. Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. That is Hebrews chapter 4, verse 16. Notice what it says. You may approach with confidence, not with shame, not with fear, not with the tentative, apologetic posture of someone who is not sure they belong, with confidence, because the throne you are approaching is not a throne of judgment. It is a throne of grace, and what you find there is not disappointment. It is mercy and grace in your time of need, not in your time of strength, in your time of need. Right now is your time of need, and the throne of grace is open, and the mercy that flows from it is not measured or rationed or held back for the deserving. It is poured out for the one who comes, and all you have to do is come, tired as you are, empty as you are, confused as you are. Come, and you will receive, not because you deserve it, but because grace, by definition, is given to people who do not. And the Apostle Paul, writing to the church in Rome, chapter 8, said something that has been anchoring exhausted believers for 20 centuries. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. In all things, not in the easy things, not in the things that make sense, in all things, including the tiredness, including the pain, including the seasons that feel like they are crushing you, God is working in all of it for good. Not because the tiredness is good, but because God is good enough to take even the worst of what you are going through and weave it into something that serves his purpose and your ultimate benefit. That does not mean every bad thing will feel good. It does not mean suffering is a gift wrapped in pretty paper. It means that nothing you go through is wasted. Nothing you endure is meaningless. Nothing you suffer is outside the reach of God's redemptive power. And the tiredness that you feel right now, the weight that has been pressing down on you until you can barely breathe, is not the final chapter. It is the raw material from which God builds the next one. And then Paul goes further. He writes what may be the most comprehensive declaration of security in the entire Bible. For I am convinced that neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers, neither height nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord. Read that list. Death cannot separate you. Life cannot separate you. Angels cannot. Demons cannot. The present cannot. The future cannot. No power, no height, no depth, nothing in all of creation can separate you from the love of God in Christ Jesus. That includes your tiredness. That includes your failure. That includes your doubt, your anger, your grief, your confusion, your midnight crying, your morning dread, your afternoon numbness. None of it can separate you. The love of God is not a fragile thread that snaps when the weight gets too heavy. It is an unbreakable chain that holds you to the heart of God, regardless of what is happening in your life or how you feel about it. You are loved, not because you are performing well, not because your faith is strong, not because you had a good, quiet time this morning. You are loved because God decided to love you before you were born, and He does not change His mind. You are loved in your tiredness. You are loved in your weakness. You are loved in your failure. You are loved in your doubt. You are loved in the dark room at 2 a.m. when you cannot sleep and you cannot pray and you cannot feel anything but the weight. You are loved there, and the love does not depend on you. It depends on Him. And He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So let this be the moment when you stop trying to carry it all. Not because the responsibilities will disappear, they probably will not. Not because tomorrow will be easier than today, it might not be, but because the one who is with you is strong enough to carry what you cannot. And he is not asking you to pretend you are fine. He is asking you to be honest. God, I feel tired. That is a prayer, and it is a prayer he answers, not always with a change in circumstances, sometimes with a change in the one who is carrying them, sometimes with a peace that makes the weight bearable even when it does not get lighter, sometimes with the quiet knowledge that you are not alone, that the shepherd is with you, that the Father is watching, that the Spirit is praying for you when you do not have words of your own. Paul wrote about that too in Romans chapter 8, verse 26. In the same way, the Spirit helps us in our weakness. We do not know what we ought to pray for, but the Spirit himself intercedes for us through wordless groans. When you do not know what to pray, when the words will not come, when all you have is a sigh or a tear or a blank stare at the ceiling, the Spirit of God prays for you. He takes your groaning and translates it into the language of heaven, and the prayers that the Spirit prays on your behalf are not weak or inarticulate. They are perfect. They are the exact prayers your situation needs, and they are being prayed right now, even while you are too tired to form a single sentence. You do not have to hold it together tonight. You do not have to be strong. You do not have to figure out the next step. You do not have to know what you believe or what you feel or what you are going to do tomorrow. You just have to let yourself be held by the one who made you, by the one who knows you better than you know yourself, by the one who has walked through every kind of suffering the world can throw at a person and come out the other side with nail-scarred hands and a gentle voice that says, "Peace be with you." Jesus did not say that to people who had earned peace. He said it to people who had failed him, abandoned him, denied him, and hidden in fear. He walked into their locked room, and the first thing he said was not, "I am disappointed." It was peace. That is the character of God. That is the heart of Christ. Peace spoken into the room where fear lives. Peace given freely to the people who deserve it least. Peace that transcends understanding and guards your heart and mind. And the invitation that Jesus gave at the beginning of this journey is the same invitation that stands at the end. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Come, not when you are rested, not when you have earned it, not when you have cleaned up your act and gotten your prayer life back on track. Come now, as you are, with whatever you have left, even if it is nothing, especially if it is nothing, because the nothing is where Jesus does his best work. The empty hand is where he places his gifts. The depleted soul is where he pours his Spirit. The broken body is where his power is made perfect. My grace is sufficient for you, he told Paul, for my power is made perfect in weakness. In weakness, not despite it, in it. Your weakness is not the obstacle to God's power. It is the canvas on which he paints it. So let this night be a turning point. Not a dramatic, cinematic, music-swelling turning point. A quiet one. The kind that happens in the dark, when no one is watching, when the only audience is God. Let this be the moment when you stop pretending you are fine and start admitting that you are tired. And let that admission be the first honest prayer you have prayed in a long time. God, I feel tired. And let the silence that follows be the space where he answers. not with thunder, not with a vision, with presence, with the settled, unshakable, unmistakable awareness that you are not alone, that the one who said, "I will never leave you nor forsake you," meant it, that the one who slept in the storm is at peace in yours, that the one who carried the cross has broad enough shoulders for your burden too. Rest now, not because you have earned it, because it has been given to you by the one who paid for it with his life. Rest because the Good Shepherd makes his sheep lie down in green pastures, not by force, but by leading them to a place so safe that their resistance finally breaks. And tonight, this place, these words, this quiet hour, this is the green pasture, not because the words are magic, but because the shepherd is real, and he has led you here, not by algorithm, not by coincidence, but by a love that never stops seeking, never stops finding, and never stops carrying. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. That is the promise. Not strength to the strong, strength to the weary. That means you. Right now, tonight, in this exact moment of honest exhaustion, close your eyes if you can. Breathe. Let the tension leave your shoulders. Let the grip of your fists loosen. Let the noise in your head quiet, even if only for a moment. And in that moment of stillness, let the voice of Jesus reach the place where the tiredness lives. Not a demanding voice, not a shaming voice. The gentlest voice you have ever heard, saying the most important thing you need to know. Come to me. I am gentle, I am humble in heart, and I will give you rest. That rest is not a future promise contingent on better behavior. It is a present reality rooted in an unchanging person. It is available to you right now, not because you prayed the right prayer or felt the right feeling, but because the one who offers it is faithful, and his faithfulness does not depend on yours. You are tired. He knows. He has always known. And his response to your tiredness is not a lecture, not a program, not a 7-step plan. It is himself, his presence, his peace, his love, and it is enough. It has always been enough. Let it hold you tonight. Let it carry you into tomorrow. And if tomorrow you wake up tired again, bring it back to him again, as many times as you need, for as many days as the tiredness lasts. He will never grow impatient. He will never grow weary. He will never turn you away. God, I feel tired. I know, child, I know. Come to me and rest.